everyone, welcome aboard to this week's live Path to Prosperity webinar. We got a pretty cool subject tonight. Actually, I'm going to try to do three, at least two, hopefully three, and possibly four different creative purchasing techniques. And this is becoming quite a hot topic lately. And a number of you have asked about some of these things. Like we went over it's called a wraparound mortgage last time. And tonight I want to go over what's called a land contract. And there's all kinds of variations with these things. I'm going to give you like the basic nuts and bolts, and maybe we'll do some examples and we can see how we can combine a couple of different techniques. But in any case, that's what we're going to do tonight. But before we get into a lot of detail, let me just check here and see who we've got. Let's see so far. Oh, good. We got some of the new folks and some veterans. Hey, Cedric. Plans are that we're going to be back out. I'll be back out in California right after the holidays. So starting like January, I think it's going to be like the first, not January 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, but that following week, which I think is like the week of the 6th or 7th or 8th or something. Literally, I'll be there the entire winter, January, February, possibly in April as I move up the coast to San Francisco. But I want to get you more involved. I know we talked about this before, but like teaching. So it'll be a great way for you to kind of travel around and shadow me while I'm out there in your backyard, so to speak. So Floyd, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you. Hopefully we'll see you in New York here in another 4 weeks, I think it is. James, hey James, you were sent an email asking about if other students have been able to gather information on the area in northern New Jersey, and the answer is yes. We got some veteran agents, veteran students who've had some success, but also one of the newer ones, and she was actually the 3-day event. So Susan let's see if Susan's on here. Susan's on here. Hey, Susan. Great strategy call today. Susan, if you look up James Bean, both of you are obviously Keller Williams. We can connect you if you can't locate each other, but maybe show James what you've done. There's a number of websites, James, that we do use to gather information, and we do have to be a little more creative in New Jersey because New Jersey is just not as user-friendly as other states as far as gathering information on people and properties. It's always been that way. I don't know why it's that way, but we just always learn to work around it, work through it, and so forth. So the good news is there's past and current students who can definitely we can collaborate with and show you some tips or pointers. So in any case, keep that in mind. Let's see. Hey, Jonathan, good to see you again too, buddy. Good to see you when I was at the Marcus Center the other week. Also, let's see, Michelle, Patricia, Richard. Hey, Rolando, how you doing, buddy? Long time. Tom Slaterbeck, Tom, good to see you too. Yeah, I saw your comment, Tom, on the Southside Johnny and the Asbury Dukes. I forgot to mention that in my post when I was out there. There actually was a concert at the Stone Pony the other night. I didn't go see it, but I could hear it. I forget who it was that played Griffin and the Griffiths or something like that. Pretty good band, by the way. In any case, good to see all you folks from everywhere. Most of you on tonight are here from New Jersey. That makes sense because I just spent an entire month in New Jersey. And actually today I was at the Clinton Marcus Center. All next month I will be in New York. Tomorrow, for example, I'll be in Jackson Heights, Midtown at Tribeca on Friday, and then for the whole month, Queens, Brooklyn, Bronx, up the Hudson Valley. Let's see, out on Long Island. So any guys who are veterans and want to come see me, just look at the schedule, go to myinvestmentservices.com, click on events, and come to class. Repetition's the mother of learning, right? And with any luck, maybe we'll have a day we can go grab some New York pizza, something like that. But in any case, guys, for all of you who are new, a little bit of housekeeping here. You'll notice that by default you're in mute mode, okay? And that's by design because we will be talking at the same time. We can't. There's no way to do that with 100 some odd people. But we can unmute you, and we do that from time to time. In the interim, what you use your question box to post questions to me. So for right now, I'm going to send you a message just to see that everybody's okay on audio and visual. So let me just type this in here. Can you see my screen and hear my voice. Okay, so you should have a message coming across on your computer there on your panel. If you can let me know that you can see me and hear me, that would be awesome. And everybody's looking pretty good so far. Floyd, yeah, Floyd, schedule a call, Floyd. Strategy call. Thanks, Jonathan. Yep, everything's going great. Michelle, oh, Michelle, good to see you. Hello from California. All right. Hey, I look forward to getting back out there. I miss it. I usually go out there a couple of times a year. I was out there end of July with my family for a short vacation up kind of north of LA. And great time, went by too fast. Didn't get to see any family out there. They actually were back east when I was out there, ironically. So in any case, let me do this. I am going to switch into an admin mode here. So for everybody who is new, everybody here, make sure you always look at the email the next day from Beverly. It's going to give you the recording of the webinar. It'll also give you updates to the systems and platforms, any update to content. She usually gives you the schedule coming up. So for example, next week we have Marcos Jacober again. Is that right? Yeah, so next week will be Tuesday the 11th, and we're going to go over tax lien certificates. Awesome subject. We did that back in May. Unfortunately, we didn't get the recording of it. So we're going to do it again. The guy's recognized as a national expert on that. So you definitely want to be on that one. That's a great way to participate in investing without actually, well, you can, it's a way to participate in the default market in a way that's it's more user friendly, it's less invasive, and it does give you opportunities for ownership too. Kind of a neat way to make a really high return on your money. Okay, without a lot of risk actually. So in any case, that's next week. Also, the next 3-day event is at the end of this month, 28th, 29th, and 30th, and that is at the Tarrytown, New York Marriott. It's at 670 White Plains Road. It's in basically Westchester Marriott. We've already got close to a dozen people registered for that, so I had a feeling that was going to happen. But all of you who are active students are all welcome. You don't have to pay if you're an active student. If you haven't gone to one, boy, I highly recommend doing it. We've had several students go to more than 1, 2, or 3, or 4, and it's just it's a great way to learn and enhance your learning of the material, and also network and get to know each other. So in any case, look for the information on that from Beverly. If you haven't registered and you want to go, just make sure you do register. We do try to save seats for the New York crowd as much as possible. I'm not sure what the head count for this. The last one was 40. This one I think is going to be more like 60. We just anticipate it's going to be a larger number of people there. So in any case, without further ado, let me get to the content for tonight. So we're going to first talk about land contracts. We just want to make sure that everybody has a clear understanding first before we jump into too much. Oh, hey, sorry, we got something from James here. James, okay. Would you like to move through the training more rapidly? I have, okay, sorry about that. We always do, hi Genevieve, how are you? So James, we usually do a little bit of housekeeping. I'm sorry I spent more time up front here tonight because there were some folks on here that we've had some personal contact on things lately, so I apologize about that. Okay, content. Let's get to it. Land contracts. A lot of you haven't seen this because it's not in the basic material. It's actually in the 6th book I've written. We just haven't published it yet. And we probably will publish it by the end of the year. However, we've been going through a lot of content in the book. So tonight we're going to first talk about land contracts, okay? I had actually had the question earlier from Susan. Are land contracts usually associated with people purchasing land from someone else? And the answer is that could be the case, but it doesn't have to just be unimproved land. It could definitely be, and often is, improved land, land and buildings on the property. So the basic premise is this. The buyer doesn't actually get legal title to the property. They do start to accumulate equitable title though. So generally what you're doing is this. As opposed to a wraparound mortgage. Remember, we went over a wraparound mortgage 2 weeks ago, and that's where you literally give the owner a new mortgage that's equal to the value of the property and larger than their current mortgage. And so you pay the owner, you the buyer, pay the owner a monthly payment on that mortgage, and they still pay their original mortgage. Okay. Again, it's you don't transfer legal title in that situation. Usually, sometimes you do, but often you wouldn't do that. What we're talking about tonight is actually different. You're not wrapping a mortgage around their existing one. You're actually giving them directly a mortgage on a property. So it works great if you have somebody who has substantial equity in a property. Maybe they don't want to get paid all up front because they don't want to take on the tax burden of having to pay a large capital gains tax. So let's just go through this. Like I said, it allows you to take control of a property without getting legal title. In its simplest form, it's like a mortgage. Legal title does not pass. We already mentioned that. There is no contract for the seller. And before we get into a lot of content on how this method works, I just want to give you a heads up here. When it comes to a default, let's just look at lease, number one, land contract, number two, and a full-blown mortgage, number three. When there's a default on a lease, you do what's called eviction. You evict the tenant, okay? It's usually the shortest time frame of the three different types of removal. So in some states, it could be done in less than 30 days. In some states, it could take a couple of months. It just depends on the state. New Jersey's kind of tough, right? Kind of tough on owners. New York's not that far behind. So in any case, when you have a full-blown mortgage, you have to do what's called a foreclosure. When you've given somebody equitable title on a property, you have to foreclose on them if they default on the contract. What's in the middle there is what's called a land contract. And if there's a default on a land contract, you do what's called an extraction. Extraction is different than an eviction. It's different than a foreclosure. In time frame wise, eviction, like I said, let's just say it's an average of 30 days on a lease default. On a mortgage default, on average, it's about 13 months. That's on a good day. If you're in California, certain parts of Canada, like extraction, the average for about 5 months. Okay, extraction is when you have a land contract go awry. You have to do what's called an extraction on that. So back to this. Typically, hang on one second here. You have a slow connection. Would you like to? Let's do this, guys. I'm going to turn off my webcam to provide more bandwidth. I apologize for doing that, but it'll give us more bandwidth. So let's say I'm sharing my webcam, so there you can't see me, but you can see the content. And let me just see if there's anything else out there I can shut down. Let's close out my email. Okay, so the content. Basically, hold off on transferring legal title to a property time, which is usually based on a number of payments or a certain dollar amount that's been paid. Okay. You can make it. It's really, you can make it based on any criteria you want, but I would say the longer you go, the more risk there is to the buyer. So let's just go through this, okay? In any circumstance, one of the protections for the seller is this. Let's say someone sells you a property under a land contract and you default, you stop paying for some reason. What you do ahead of time is you execute what's called a quick claim deed. And you don't actually file it, you just simply record, you document it, you execute it. A quick claim deed is a quick, fast way to transfer title to a property, and you forego all rights. So in this situation, if a buyer is buying a property under a land contract, okay, as part of the original sales agreement, the buyer and seller agree to a certain term before legal title is transferred. It could be 5 years, could be 60 payments if you want to call it that, or a certain dollar amount, say 60,000 has been paid onto the property. You could do a combination of those things, right? But at the same time, when you execute the sales agreement, you want to write up what's called a quick claim deed. So if the buyer defaults, all right, what happens is the seller retains the quick claim deed in possession. If the buyer defaults, that seller can then record the quick claim deed, all right, and that seller can gain back all the rights of the property, including possession. Okay. So in any case, just one thing to remember, it's sort of a protection for the seller. So if you're a buyer using a land contract, just bear in mind you're going to have fewer rights in this situation, all right? Just part and parcel to the program. In any case, the longer you wait before the more risk there is to the buyer. Okay, example. Let's say you agree as a buyer to buy a property under a land contract, and you agree that you're not going to give legal title until 10 years has passed. And then at that point, you may have to do like a balloon payment, get a new first mortgage, and buy out the seller. Well, in 10 years, a lot can happen. I mean, my gosh, the seller could die. They could lose a job. They could go through a divorce. I mean, they could literally lose the property in foreclosure. All kinds of things could happen. So you want to be careful how you document your sales agreement. But before we go there, I just want to talk about something we just mentioned, which is this. Typically, legal title is not transferred to a certain period of time. And in that interim, when you're making payments, I want you to write this down, guys, or definitely, no matter what you do, remember this part. When you make payments on a land contract, they generally are applied in a certain pecking order. First in that order is interest. You pay the interest on the purchase of the property. All right. Then you pay any other charges, whether they're taxes, insurance, assessments, things like that. And thirdly is when you apply whatever's left to unpaid principal balance. Okay. And let's say, the contract states the legal title will pass before the principal balance is paid in full. Then at that point, you do a balloon payment. We mentioned that. Okay. So let's just look at legal stuff, right? One of those legal concerns is this. There's, in most mortgages with banks, there's what's called a due on sale clause, okay? And one fear that consumers have with a land contract is, what if the bank, the current owner has a mortgage outstanding on the property, and that bank that he got his mortgage with, he or she got the mortgage with, finds out that he sold the property, didn't pass legal title, but he did pass equitable title, right? Well, the bank, in their due on sale clauses, will often say when title is passed, it doesn't say just legal title. It could include any form of title, which in this case could include equitable title. Equitable meaning you made payments, certain portions of those payments have been applied to the purchase of the property. And as soon as you have $1 applied to the purchase of a property, principal balance wise, that $1 is considered equity. I mean, literally, that's the rule, $1. So the reality is this, though, from a practical standpoint, if legal title has to transfer, if there is a bank holding a mortgage with the current owner, they're just not going to find out. There's no real mechanism for that. I mean, the current owner keeps the insurance, everything intact, right? So, but the fact is something like that could happen. The bank could come in and do what's called call the note due, right, or execute the deal on sale close. So in any case, if this kind of thing happens, there are remedies. You have to actually document what you and the seller would do in this situation. If and when it happens, you have to have decisions already made in advance, right? What would you do in the unlikely situation that should occur? So let's listen to this. Let's look at an example. All right. Let's say we have a situation where we might otherwise do the wraparound mortgage that we described 2 weeks ago. All right. A property market value $240,000. The current owner has a mortgage of $120,000. They're making $1,000 a month payments, and they want $40,000 down, and they're willing to take a wraparound mortgage for $200,000 at 8%. You might be able to persuade the seller to sell for $220,000, all right? Give them a smaller down payment, And in this case, well, let's just do this. Let's just, instead of doing a wraparound mortgage, let's say we do the land contract. So instead of taking legal title, you give the seller a contract, $20,000 down payment, paid off in 10 payments, right? 10 semi-annual payments of $1,000 each with no interest, right? So semi-annual being twice a year, right? And you give them a mortgage at $200,000 for 8%. You got some carrying costs, some overhead, $500 a month, taxes, insurance, and so forth. Your monthly outlay would be $1,500 a month in this example. Well, let's say this place is a duplex that you can rent for $2,000 a month total. Well, that still leaves you $500 cash flow. Even if you have a management fee and costs for maintenance and repairs of $100 a month each, well, let's say $200 a month for management and $100 a month for maintenance and repairs. That still leaves you $200 a month positive cash flow, right? So you can see how this can work in a certain situation where maybe the seller doesn't want all their money right up front, okay? And maybe you don't have the type of credit that you'd like to have to get a traditional mortgage to buy the property. And the seller has security knowing that they haven't conveyed legal title to the property. They have positive cash flow. Remember, you're giving them more on a monthly basis than they have going out, by the tune of $500 in this example. But again, there's, just like everything in life, there's the yin and the yang, the good and the bad to all these different strategies and techniques. And I personally have used most of these, but I don't have to do that anymore. It's a great way to help you get up and running in the business, to use these creative strategies to purchase properties. So we mentioned this earlier, that if you have an extended period of time before legal title is transferred, things can happen. The bank could call in on the note. People get sick, people die, just things happen, and you have to have in writing what's going to happen in that situation. So your contract should definitely contain that language in the contract. Okay. One of the things you can do is you could well, here's what you could do. You could go ahead and you're going to execute the deed in advance anyways. You're not going to record the deed showing that you're transferring legal title. What you're going to do is have it held with a title company. So to protect yourself as the buyer, you would send all your payments to the title company. They would record that they've been made, and they would send all the payments to the seller. So if the seller ends up getting divorced, at least you could say up to that point that you've met your obligations, and the title company holds the deed. Like, they take possession of it. So in a divorce situation, in this example, you have some degree of protection. So another thing that's mentioned here, I don't personally advocate this, I'll just mention it, is you can record any legal document. It doesn't have to just be a deed or a transfer of title. You can actually record a sales agreement. You can even record a lease. What that means is you go downtown and you have that recorded. You actually file it on county court records, so that it can be retrieved at a future date if needed. So I don't personally advocate this, but what it's saying is you could actually record a sales agreement. But if you do that, that means it's on file that the seller has sold the property to you, even though it's under a land contract, that the title didn't actually pass, but the sales agreement is recorded. And what that means is it's searchable. Okay. You can search by name, you can search by address. And let's say a bank is doing a mortgage on a property down the road, and they use your subject property as a subject property for an appraisal. And the appraiser goes in and looks things up and says, hey, this one recently had a let me look at that one. And they use that in the appraisal. And the banker making the mortgage on the other property, making a loan on the other property, sees that. They literally can find out purely by accident. Okay, so that's why I don't like recording those things if it's not necessary. Really what it takes is, again, a seller who's wants to sell the property, doesn't want to be paid all up front because they don't want to take that tax burden on. They're willing to extend you credit over a period of time. So if you don't have the best credit in the world, you can use this technique. The seller gets cash flow, you get cash flow. small down payment, even you could finance over time. So there's a number of really good reasons why you should do this under the right circumstances. Now let me do this. I do want to go over a couple other techniques, but I want to make sure that we go over any questions you guys might have. So let me go back here. Looks like we do have some questions. Let's see here. Okay, this is from Fassel. Hey, Fassel, how you doing, buddy? Let's see, Fassel. Okay, the seller still pays capital gains, however, spread over time. Is that correct? Yes. So Fassel, what happens is, there's two types of accounting: cash accounting and accrual accounting. When I file my tax returns, I always do it on a cash basis. Only money I've actually spent and money I've actually received. Okay, so income coming in, expenses going out, only on a cash basis, not invoices like payments that are due, not collectibles. People owe me money. I'm not counting that if I haven't collected it. So in this situation, the seller is only going to pay taxes on what they've actually received. They're going to use a cash-based accounting system, not an accrual-based. So that's what I recommend there. And then, so you're exactly right. They would only pay capital gains taxes on what they received in that year. So good question. Okay, let's see. I think we had another one up there. Let's see. I just saw it. Hang on one second, guys. Okay. Patricia is asking, what is the cost of the title company on a monthly? Patricia, it actually depends. Really what they're doing is they're acting as sort of like as an escrow agent, and this type of scenario happens all over the place all the time. So it's something that's negotiable. You could ask them to say, what would you charge on a monthly basis to receive and dispense a monthly payment? And you might tell them that they will get all the title work on this transaction on the front end and the back end, and that will encourage them to lower their fee. Or what they might say is, since let's say it's only for 5 years, which is 60 payments, and they're going to get the title work on that on both ends of it, they might say they'll waive that. They won't charge anything to receive and disperse funds. At a minimum, I mean, I know when I do payroll, for example, I think I pay like $50 a month, and that's could be dozens of people that are getting paid. So something like this is not that expensive. I mean, that's a good question, though, because it's an expense that you have to account for. Okay, it's not necessary to do it that way, but as you can imagine, having a third neutral party there acting as the gatekeeper and keeping the deed in storage until such time it's needed to be recorded and receiving and dispersing payments. It's nice to have a neutral third party doing that in case something should happen. So the reason we spend so much time, guys, documenting these things in our sales agreements and our contracts is not because they're going to happen absolutely. It's just that there's a chance that they'll happen, and we don't know if they're going to happen or not. So it's sort of like an insurance policy. If you think about it, we pay thousands of dollars every year on insurance: car insurance, home insurance, life insurance, medical insurance. And yet, with a situation like this, $50 a month is not that expensive to provide a certain degree of insurance, because if one or the other party is responsible for holding documents and things like that, or all kinds of scenarios, and something goes wrong, the other person is basically at risk. They have less protection. However, with a third neutral party involved, quite frankly, everything's kept on the up and up. Everything's kept neutral. Okay, so in any case, I appreciate the question, and let me move forward here, guys, and talk about the next subject. There's another one that's come up recently. In fact, one of our students is actually doing this now. Let me go back to the beginning. Hang on one second. What this involves is borrowing against a cash value portion of a whole life insurance policy. So it's a strategy I've seen used in the past. It's always been usually the affluent who are using a strategy. Of wealthy people would use a strategy. So a little bit of background. Some basic parameters here to remember and write down. Um, Most people, when you study insurance, if you're like middle class or lower, the insurance companies want you to buy whole life policies, and yet every course we ever take says don't buy whole life, just buy term life because it's a lot cheaper. Okay, and lock in early, lock into your term life early in life. Okay, so the the premiums stay low. However, whole life policies have some other added advantages to them that you might not otherwise have been aware of if you didn't work with affluent clients or you yourself have become affluent over the years. So one of the reasons that affluent people get whole life policies is um, it's protection for their estate. So let's say you have somebody who's built a business themselves and it's grown to a massive business. And I can give you some examples from clients of mine in the past who had a family business started literally like in their garage, for example, or their basement, and grew to be worth tens of millions of dollars and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay, um, and they grew the business themselves homegrown. So what that means is the principal is the person, him or herself. Okay, now let's say something happens to that person. They unfortunately pass away, for example. Um, a lot of times, what happens is that business have to be sold at a dramatic discount. The families, sometimes the family doesn't want to or isn't able to run the business. Even if they try, the business generally loses value very, very rapidly. Okay. So what affluent people really do is to protect their heirs and their estate is they'll get a pretty largeable, sizable whole life policy so that if something happens, their heirs are able to maintain their lifestyle and potentially do what's necessary, have peace of mind and time to react to the death of the loved one and what to do with the family business. I mean, that's one of the most likely examples of how and why this is used. Now, that's just pure, simple protection, estate protection. But here's where the real stuff gets going on. These are what we call the getting the goods in the woods. Okay. Favorite quote from what a friend of mine, Tim Rhodes, uses that, getting the goods in the woods. So here's some of the goods here. Whole life policy over time builds up cash value. That cash value is a marketable instrument that you can leverage and use for multiple purposes. Okay. Um, in the old days, you could actually take out the cash value of the policy, and they would thereby then reduce the protection of the policy, the actual life insurance component of the policy, and you couldn't like just pay it back. You'd have to simply buy more insurance. However, there were strategies and companies that sprang up over the years that saw the value of having a cash value in a whole life policy, and they would be willing to lend money to you based on the cash value of your whole life policy. And of course, as you might imagine, you would name them as a payee should you actually pass away. They would get paid, if in other words, if you pass away before the loan that they give you is paid back, as part of your whole life policy um, uh, documentation, that lender will be named as a primary payee, and they get paid first. They replenish, they get their loan back paid off, and then remainder goes to your heirs. Okay, it gets even better than that, though. Okay, you don't have to just borrow against your own whole life policy. You can actually borrow against other people's whole life policies, and you can even borrow an amount larger than the cash value of your whole life policy based on other collateral you have. So in other words, one of these such companies might give you a loan that's based on or secured by a couple of things. Number one is you might have a lot of land, okay, and they would say, okay, we're going to collateralize the land as part of this loan, but what they would really do that gives them protection is it would actually be named as a payee on your whole life policy, which reduces the interest rate on the loan and gives you all kinds of advantages as far as rates and terms go. It also allows you to, let's say you do pass away, the whole life policy gets paid out, that lender gets paid, they then release they no longer collateralizing the property that you own, that goes to your heirs. So your heirs get paid, they keep the property, the lender got paid his or her money back, and while you were alive, you got to make use of the money to make more investments. It's an awesome, awesome strategy. Now, I did mention the possibility of borrowing against other people's policies. I know it sounds crazy, but believe it or not, it actually happens a lot. So one of the things you can do is, let's say you have a friend or a family member who has a sizable whole life policy. They happen to mention it, but they're kind of they have a certain fear factor. What you can say is, you say, look, I'd like to borrow against your whole life policy. I will purchase a term policy on you to make up the difference between, let's say they actually pull the money out, for example, of the whole life policy. You could buy a term policy to make up the difference in the death benefit, okay? Term policies are generally a lot cheaper than whole life policies. You could also take a term life policy on you. So let's say you pass away, you've borrowed the money against that person's whole life policy. They're not out of luck because you name them as a payee on your term life policy. There's all kinds of ways to skin this cat. But I see questions coming in. This usually happens. We go over this subject maybe once a year, and it always generates a lot of questions because people hear about it, they don't understand it, and they've always heard whole life policies are expensive. It's not a good investment. And I would agree that in and of itself, you wouldn't buy a whole life policy for the small return you get on the cash value. There's much better ways to use your money. But because of how it can be leveraged, it is a tremendous opportunity to leverage the cash value to do some further investing. So let's just quick go to some questions here. Let's see. This is from Floyd. Floyd is asking, okay, the key to this strategy is to minimize the death benefit and maximize the cash value. You can find it with a single payment. Oops, sorry. You can fund it with a single payment to bump cash value. Yeah, and and I've seen it done, Floyd. Matter of fact, brand new policy, perfect example. Brand new policy, just executed. The purchaser of the policy had an instant cash value of $10,000. They didn't make $10,000 in payments. They just got an instant cash value at $10,000 because they were well capitalized. They had land, so forth and so on. But what that did is they were able to borrow against that by a factor of 18. So they were able to borrow $180,000 against that policy that was further secured by the land that they owned. So it was an amazing, amazing strategy. They gave them money, capital, to then start to build on the land. So hope you guys your wheels are spinning on the strategy, because you probably know people you may not have previously considered who may have a substantial whole life policy, and all that cash value is just sitting there completely untapped and not being fully utilized. And there's a way for you to help them profit from it, help yourself profit from it, and it's basically win-win for everybody. So, and again, I just want to emphasize though that if you're doing something like that on someone other than yourself, just make sure that you offer like a term policy in lieu of the lesser death benefit, to provide security for them and their family, or you and your family, should something happen. I mean, life happens, guys. The longer you live, you realize how we're very vulnerable. We're not in control at any day. Or what could be called. And I'm not. Just know that it's a great strategy to use, but we also want to be mindful of how we can minimize risk for us and for other people that we're involving in these strategies. So, okay, let's do this, guys. I want to kind of back up here. We can go over strategy 13 if you want, but I want to go over what's called a blanket mortgage. Okay, people have asked, about wraparound mortgages, about I'm sorry, blanket mortgages. I've just lost train of thought there. Sorry about that. And of course, the one went overnight, land contracts. So again, wraparound mortgage, you literally provide a mortgage that gets paid to the seller. The seller keeps your original mortgage, and they're still paying on that. And they have enough income coming in from what you're paying them to pay off the one that they already have over, pay their monthly payments and still have monthly cash flow. Land contract, similar type structure. But again, deed's not transferred, legal title's not transferred, excuse me. And there's some other factors we just went over that. So what I want to do now is talk about a blanket mortgage. All right, a blanket mortgage, a different strategy, and it's one I've used a number of times. The first time I used it, I was a little bit nervous, quite frankly, because I was, collateralizing almost all of my assets. Okay, and as you might imagine, that felt kind of risky, but it allowed me to make major leaps and bounds in the growth of my portfolio. So let's just describe this first, okay? Blanket mortgage, by design, is a mortgage that actually encumbers multiple properties, okay? So for example, let's say you own 10 buildings, 10 properties, and you have equity in each one of those, ranging from 50,000 to 200,000, for example, okay? Let's just say 50,000 to 100,000. Average of 75,000 equity in each property. Totally untapped equity, okay? Times 10, that's $750,000. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's equity that could and should be utilized and leveraged to grow your portfolio. So the strategy is this. Instead of getting individual equity loans against each individual property, which can be quite cumbersome and quite expensive and time consuming, every other thing under the sun. It's also, now you've got like 10 different loans you're dealing with, okay? In addition to ones you already have. So what you can do is execute what's called a blanket mortgage. A blanket mortgage is used to tap into the equity across all or some, if not all, of your properties. So I did this exact same thing. My gosh, it's probably been, I'm gonna say 20 years ago or something, first time I did it. So I had equity built up a little bit in several different properties, and I went and found a lender who was willing to lend money to me based on the equity in all those properties. Okay, and he was okay with the fact that I already had first mortgages on those properties. So he was willing to take a second position, right? Now, what we did was this. We actually utilized parts of some of the other strategies. So what we did was this. I got a commercial line of credit, not a flat fixed rate mortgage, a commercial line of credit based on my equity in all these properties. What we did is we executed liens on all of those properties, but we did not record the liens. Okay, we basically drew up the liens. We held had a title company hold the liens in escrow. Okay, and if at any time I defaulted on that mortgage or something happened to me, whatever reason I couldn't pay it, there was a pre-confession of judgment, which means the title company was required by contract to actually record the lien, which will provide protection for the mortgage holder, the guy that gave me the blanket mortgage on all the properties. Okay, that never had to happen, thank goodness. I mean, obviously I'm here, but the reality is it gave him an added measure of security. He also had security in the fact that he was tying up equity in multiple properties, not just one. All right, and it allowed me to go out and buy another bigger property. So the reason this is important is this. I had an opportunity to buy a large building, and yet I didn't have capital substantial enough to basically secure it and get a brand new first mortgage, all that kind of stuff. So what we did was I talked to the seller. I said, look, we can do this one or two ways. I could either take a line of credit, or you could finance the down payment too. And I'll give you a mortgage across all of my properties, encumbering the equity in those properties. And we can even execute deeds and all that. I said, or plan B is I could do the same strategy, but do it privately and not involve you as a seller. I could go to a third party. Generally, I'd pay a higher interest rate to do that, but that's what this seller wanted. He didn't know me. He wasn't willing to, take the risk of financing the down payment. If he had, I would have asked for a lower interest rate than I paid the third party person. But regardless, I ended up using the third party. We were able to get the line of credit high enough that I was able to make the down payment on this new property. Okay, and went ahead and got a first mortgage from a bank to pay the other. It was essentially about 65%. Okay, so I put down 35% using my blanket mortgage. All right, and remember, I didn't have to have a lien on that. That didn't create a new mortgage for that property. I already had the mortgages on the other properties. What it did is it gave me the equity to borrow against to make the down payment. And then I got a regular bank mortgage for the rest of the equity in the property. Now, having done that the first time, I really liked it. I liked the results. I was cash flowing. I was very quickly able to pay off that line of credit. And the lender actually increased the line of credit, which was really neat. In fact, I did that enough times that the line of credit became so large, I was able to buy $1 million building for cash. And that's when everything changed for me. When I bought that property, remember, I'm using a blanket line of credit, blanket mortgage on my other properties to draw against to pay the purchase the property for cash. So it looked like it was a cash deal because it was a cash deal. And by the way, later on, I did go back and borrow against that property, but only 50% loan to value. At the time, it was enough. I raised the value of the building, raised all the rents. Basically, it doubled the value in the building. Got a brand new first mortgage on it, paid back the line of credit again. So now I had another income producing asset on the books worth a couple $1 million, paying a lot of money every month. I mean, and we were bringing in probably $50,000 a month on that property. And so I had the added income producing asset to my portfolio. And at the end of the day, I still had that line of credit that I could still use. It's an awesome, awesome strategy. And I wanted to bring this up tonight because I wanted to point out that when you use some of these strategies, it leads you to being able to and having an understanding of using these other strategies. Okay, some of them can be combined. You can use parts of one strategy and parts of another strategy. This would allow me to take advantage of prior strategies and start to operate on a cash basis. So in any case, let's do this. Let's check for questions because this is one of my favorite strategies that I've used over the years and still do today, by the way. In fact, I'll just tell you this, guys. This strategy I just gave you here, using a blanket mortgage, I actually really I don't use many other strategies at all anymore. This one is so powerful. You have to build up to it, but the way you start is you start with where you are right now and who you are and what you have to work with. Okay, and start building a portfolio. And the sooner you start, the sooner you can build equity. And the sooner you build equity, the sooner you can use a strategy. All right. When you can use other strategies, I'm not saying don't use other strategies. What I'm saying is over time, this strategy becomes much more appealing and it allows you to grow more rapidly. It actually allows you to put your real estate portfolio building machine in sort of perpetual motion. Okay. It literally feeds itself. The machine feeds itself. So in any case, guys, that's what I had for tonight. We can probably go another 10 more minutes, but I don't think we should start another strategy because I don't think we get it in on time. And also, I do want to remind you that next week we do have Marcos coming back on to talk about tax lien certificates. And for some of you, that's going to be an awesome strategy. And I'll tell you why. A lot of you are in New Jersey right here on this call. And New Jersey is the #1 per capita foreclosure state right now in the country. In other words, more foreclosures per capita. What that means is there's a lot of opportunities to purchase tax lien certificates in your area. You can find them. In fact, some of our students have already done this. Daryl Murphy, I don't know if Daryl's on tonight, but Daryl was one of the first guys out of the gate to go and learn this and look up and see what the different opportunities were in New Jersey. They're different. It's different county by county, but they're out there, and you and I and everybody can participate in this wonderful opportunity that we're going to talk about next week. Now, after that, we're probably going to get back to basics. We've got a lot of new folks coming on board in the last month or so, and I want to go back to the basics after next week and talk about the fundamentals and the different training programs, so you guys can gain traction quickly, get out there and execute, and start bringing in some commissions, okay? And buying your own properties, okay? So in any case, let me just check and see if we got any other final questions here. I don't think we do. Yeah, I think we're caught up here. Okay, guys, well, listen, I hope you have an awesome taken weeks vacations and still done a strategy call, like when I was in California, but quite frankly, you know, that's really not a real vacation. So this was a real vacation. Didn't even have the computer with me. How about that? That was by accident, by the way. Got to the airport and realized I didn't have a computer. You know, when they asked you to, you know, break out your computer and your liquids, and I thought, uh-oh, I've lost my computer. Well, I think it was a blessing. I think it was just God saying, you know what, you need to just take time with your wife and not worry about the computer and all that. So I appreciate your guys' patience. Some of you had sent me messages. I hope I'm almost caught up with everything. If I'm not, if any of you sent me something and I didn't, so now go ahead and send it again just to be safe. I want to make sure I keep up with everybody. Bless you and your families. We will see you next week on the 11th to talk about tax lien certificates. Okay. Okay, guys. Hope you have an awesome night, awesome rest of the week, and God bless you and your families. Take care. Bye-bye.